What's up, guys? Welcome back to King Kraken Sports. Mike here. Yesterday, if you didn't see it, we did the AFC East and the NFC East as far as the draft grades. Today, we're doing the Northern Division, so we're doing AFC and NFC North. Let's get right into it. As usual, guys, this is all based off where I had them on my board, fit. If I don't know who a player is, unless there's special circumstances I graded as a C, you'll see some of these special circumstances later on in the video. If you didn't get a chance to see the videos yesterday, the links will be in the description. Let's get into it. Let's start off with the Cleveland Browns, because they had the first overall pick. And they went with Baker Mayfield at 1, which shocked a lot of people, because the entire draft process we were hearing, well, it's going to be Sam Darnold. Maybe it's going to be Josh Rosen, but it's probably going to be Sam Darnold. Well, maybe it's going to be Josh Allen, but it's probably going to be Sam Darnold. Okay, it's going to be Josh Allen, but it could be Sam Darnold. Now it's going to be Sam Darnold. And then on the day of the draft, nope, it's Baker Mayfield. But, still could be Sam Darnold, but we're pretty sure it's Baker Mayfield. Then it turns out to actually be Baker Mayfield. What the fuck, Cleveland? For a team that has had 712 quarterbacks start a game for you since you came back to the league in 1999. Why are you going with another player where their fit in the NFL is a question? I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold fan either, because he was my number 2 quarterback. But Josh Rosen was still there if you didn't want to take Darnold. And why take Mayfield at 1 when you could have taken him at 4? You could have taken Bradley Chubb or a Saquon Barkley. You need a running back. You could have taken Saquon at 1, and you would have been fine probably getting Mayfield at fucking 4, because the Giants weren't going to take a quarterback. They probably would have taken, or if Sam Darnold fell in their lap, they would have gone, with Darnold at 2. The Jets probably would have gone Rosen at 3 had he been available, which meant Mayfield would have been there at 4. I don't get it. He was my number 13 overall player. I don't want to make it sound like I hate the Baker Mayfield as a player. He's my number 13 player. He was my number 3 quarterback. I just don't see the logic in taking him number 1 when no one else was probably going to take him in that top 3 if you had taken Saquon. I gave it a B. I would have liked the pick a lot more if they took him at 4 than if they did at 1. That's all I'm going to say. Moving on, they had the Texans pick, which was the 4th pick in the draft, and they took Denzel Ward, the corner out of Ohio State. Now, I had a feeling Denzel Ward would either go in the top 4 or would probably fall to around 10. There really wasn't much middle ground for him. I like the pick. I do. But as soon as Bradley Chubb made it to 4, I just assumed it was Bradley Chubb that was going to be the pick. I like Denzel Ward as a player. He was easily the best corner in this class, so I have no problem with the pick. I gave it an A-. He was my number 10 overall player. Then the Browns started kind of doing Browns-type stuff. At 33, they take Austin Corbett, the tackle/guard/center out of Nevada, to go along with former Nevada offensive lineman Joel Bitonio. Problem with this pick. Connor Williams is still available, and Connor Williams, even if you were to compare his Maryland game to Austin Corbett's best game, is miles better than Austin Corbett. I don't understand why you wouldn't pass on a easily the best offensive tackle in the class who's sitting there with the first pick of the 2nd round to take a guy that I had a 3rd round grade on. I gave it a B. Not a big fan of this pick. Thought it was a reach. Then at 35, again, Darius Geis is still on the board. You need a running back. And you take Nick Chubb, who was my number 66 player and like my 8th ranked running back. If I'm not mistaken, let me double check. Nick Chubb was my 8th ranked running back. Mark Walton, who was higher than him, was still on the board. Kerryon Johnson, who was higher than him, was still on the board. Ronald Jones was still on the board. He was my number 4 running back. Darius Geis was still on the board. He was my number 2 running back. Why go with Nick Chubb? Why go with a guy who's had so many carries tacked on, doesn't have the explosion that he had when he was younger? Remember, this is someone who had a horrific ACL tear in his sophomore year and never regained that explosiveness. And you could get a Darius Geis or a Ronald Jones Like, what the fuck? John Dorsey, I thought you were good at this whole drafting thing. I still don't mind the pick, but based on who was available, I couldn't give it an A, I gave it a B+. Then they started doing some good shit. 67, Chad Thomas out of the University of Miami. Alright, so you don't get Bradley Chubb early, but you get a kind of a lesser pass rusher later on. Good value. I had Chad Thomas, my 78th ranked player. They got him at 67. I gave it an A-. It fits a need. They can rotate him with Ogba. It's not like Ogba is a bad player, but I just kind of think that when you're the Browns, you just need the best possible players imaginable, and having Chubb would have made that defense fucking terrifying. 105, Antonio Callaway. A lot of people weren't sure if this guy was going to get drafted, given that he didn't play last year due to the credit card fraud shit that was going on at the University of Florida, not to mention numerous off-field issues. Based on value alone, based on talent, if he had played this year and there weren't off-field issues, this guy is easily the best wide receiver in this class. But he didn't play last year. He has multiple off-field issues, marijuana charges. He was arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and was cleared. I don't want to speak ill, but I mean at the same time, there's a lot of risk with this, and you've already got Josh Gordon in that in that building too. There's a lot of risk in that wide receiver class, and Corey Coleman has been bad, so a lot of fucking risk. I gave it an A- based off of talent. He was 175 on my board, but that was factoring the off-field issues. I figured he would get drafted. It's kind of touchy. But this could have ended up being a C because either he gets his shit together and he's fine, or he's out of the league in 2 years because he done fucked up again. 150, they get Jannard Avery, the linebacker out of Memphis. I had him at 176 on my board. This is an A- pick. Love the fit. Really like it. John Dorsey starting to actually collect better assets in the middle of the draft. And then I'll lump these two guys together. Damian Ratley, a wide receiver out of, I believe, Texas A&M. Could have been West Texas A&M. The reason I say that is because I don't know who the fuck he is. And Simeon Thomas, a defensive back, I believe. And again, no idea who he was. Now, with these two guys specifically, these would normally be, because they're not on my board, a C. But I took them one step further. I Googled Kuiper, McShay, Connor Rogers, and Matt Miller to see if they had heard of any of these guys. None of these guys had them mentioned at any point. And when Matt Miller does a 500-player big board and you're not on it, this is a bad pick. I gave them both an F. But ignoring the two Fs, because they're later round guys, they don't really matter that much. They'd probably be camp bodies at best. I ended up rating the Browns draft a B. Not bad, but not great. When you have the wealth of picks that they have in the first 3 rounds, you've got to nail them, and I really don't feel like they nailed any of them except Denzel Ward. So a nice solid B for Cleveland, but they could have done a lot better. Moving on to a team whose draft I really did like, the Cincinnati Bengals. Billy Price at 21. Maybe a little bit of a reach, but looking at their guard depth, they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing at guard. At roster, so getting him at 21, I gave it an A-. I really like the fit. I think he's a great, player. He's coming off of a pec injury, but he should be fine to go in a couple months. At 54, getting Jesse Bates III, the safety out of Wake Forest. I like the pick. I like the player. They got him at 54. He was 57 on my board, but Justin Reed was still available, and Ronnie Harrison was still available, and those were guys I had ranked higher than Bates. So the only reason why I didn't give it like a great grade, I gave it a B. And then they went back-to-back in round 3 with picks I absolutely loved. Sam Hubbard out of Ohio State and Malik Jefferson out of Texas. So 78, 70, 77, 78, back-to-back picks. I had Hubbard ranked 21st on my board and Malik Jefferson ranked 26th on my board. These are back-to-back A+'s. Cincinnati fucking nailed this. Then they get Mark Walton out of the University of Miami at 112. He was number 60 on my board. Again, one of the running backs that I had graded higher than Nick Chubb, who went at 35. Mark Walton is the Giovanni Bernard replacement. It's kind of clear that the The Bengals are kind of ridding themselves of those older running backs that they missed on a couple years ago, with Jeremy Hill not being on the roster anymore, and now drafting a replacement for Gio, and they're going to move forward with Walton as a third down back with Joe Mixon as the bell cow. One of these guys is going to hit. I gave this pick an A. 151, they get Devontae Harris out of, I want to say, Illinois State. I like the kid. I watched a lot of his tape from last year. Couldn't find a lot of his tape from this year. Based on that, I wasn't sure, based off his size profile and just his level of competition, whether he would be drafted. I graded him at 221, which is a priority UDFA grade. They got him at 151. I gave it a B minus just based off of value, but I think this kid's a really good player. And eventually, Cincinnati has to get some corners that hit. That actually produce. Then at 158, they got Andrew Brown, the defensive tackle out of Virginia. A lot of people on Twitter thought Andrew Brown was like a first or second round pick. I never really saw it with him. This is more in line with where I thought he would go. I had him at 164 on my board. This is great value. This is an A minus. Darius Phillips, another player I really liked early in the process, but just due to the wealth of corners that kept coming up in the draft, started falling down my board a bit. They got him at 170. I had him at 187. This is another good pick. I gave this a B plus just because I felt like him and Devontae Harris are kind of the same player. But I just feel like Darius Phillips was a little bit better. But if you're going to go with Devontae Harris, why double down and get the same player in Phillips? You know what? It's the Cincinnati Bengals. Andy Dalton is not a great quarterback. He's kind of average to below average. Get himself at least a backup. You lost A.J. McCarron in free agency. Not that really matters all that much. A.J. McCarron's not that good. But you get Logan Woodside at 249. I had him, again, priority UDFA. He was 217 on my board. I gave it an A. Again, just going to be a solid backup quarterback for Cincinnati for a couple of years. Roderick Taylor, the offensive tackle out of Ole Miss. He played right tackle at Ole Miss because... for any of you freaks that are into 2019 already, Greg Little was the left tackle there. He's going to be picked really high next year. Rod Taylor, decent player, was someone that I had on my watch list, but didn't get a chance to watch a full 3 games to make a solid opinion on, so he wasn't technically on my board. I like the player, though, so I gave it a B+. And then they nailed it to end their draft at 253 by getting Auden Tate, the wide receiver / tight end out of Florida State. The reason I say wide receiver, tight end, he's big, but he's not fast. But he's also, he's 6'5", he's about 220, 225, but he has very, very limited athleticism. So we might need to put on some size and become a tight end. I had him graded at one point in my top 50, but after the combine and how limited he was athletically, he dropped big time. He fell down to 181 on my board because I had to go back and watch some tape on him, and then it was confirmed on tape that the athleticism that I thought was there wasn't. I gave it an A- pick, but overall, Cincinnati gets A-, B, A+, A+, A, B-, A-, B+, A, B+, A-. I gave them an A- overall. I love this draft. This was a really solid draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, this is the second straight year where I have hated their first round, their first pick of the draft. Last year, Marlon Humphrey I wasn't really sold on, and then Tyus Bowser, who they got in the second round, I absolutely despised that pick. They come back this year, they get Hayden Hurst at 25. I had him graded at 103 on my board. I gave this a D just because I thought Dallas Goedert was a much better, tight end. Mike Gesicki was a better tight end prospect. Mark Andrews was a better tight end prospect. Hayden Hurst was my 4th ranked tight end, and I had a day 3 grade on him. So I gave this a D. I thought this was a really bad pick. I'm not really sure what it is about Ozzie Newsome's first round picks lately that I just don't like. But they made up for it. They traded back in with my Philadelphia Eagles at the end of round 1, and they got Lamar Jackson at 32. He was ranked 33 on my board. I gave this an A+. Listen, Joe Flacco has been bad ever since winning that Super Bowl, so, and he's got a contract where they can have an out of it next year, so they can immediately start grooming Lamar Jackson for not this year, but for next year, where Flacco's off the roster and this offense is completely different than it was this past year. 83 was a pick. As soon as Edwin Mulitalo said God works in mysterious ways, I had a feeling this was going to be what the pick was. Orlando Brown Jr. out of Oklahoma. The reason I said Orlando Brown Jr. specifically is because his dad, Zeus Orlando Brown, back in the day played for the Baltimore Ravens. Profiles very similar, both just massive human beings. I was not a big fan of Orlando Brown. He was number 152 on my board. His tape was okay. He showed no real footwork and relied entirely on upper body strength, which won't work all that well at the next level when some of these defensive ends are just as strong as he is. And my other problem with that is he ran like a 5'8" at the combine. Now I know offensive tackles, but he showed no explosion. His drill work was bad. When guys at the combine are pointing at you because they're trying to figure out how many back in the line do I have to beat so I can match up with you and make myself some money. It just wasn't a good look. I was more comfortable with him at this pick, though, just because if he had gone round 1 or 2, this would have been an awful pick. I had a day 3 grade on him. He went round 3. I'm okay with it, but I don't necessarily like it. I gave it a B. 3 picks later, they go with his teammate, Mark Andrews, the tight end / wide receiver out of Oklahoma. He's not going to block a damn thing. Excuse me. And, he's not going to block a damn thing, but he's going to be a wide receiver that Lamar Jackson can find, when they ultimately form this new offense that everyone thinks that they're going to form, myself included. And they are going to be potentially an offensive juggernaut in that system. It's going to be completely different than really anything I think I've ever seen out of Baltimore as long as I've been watching football, where they've had I don't think I've ever seen them really with an athletic quarterback outside of the limited time they had Troy Smith. But I like the pick. I gave it an A-. He was the number 58 player on my board. Third ranked tight end, like really good value. Got him at 86. Really, really solid. Come back, day 3, 118. They get Anthony Averett, the corner / nickel back nickel corner, out of Alabama. Ozzie Newsome gonna draft some Alabama guys. Come on, we should all know this by now. And this was another great pick. Anthony Averett was number 88 on my board. They got him at 118. I gave this an A. 122, though, not as great of a pick. Kenny Young, the linebacker out of UCLA. There were just better players available at the position when you have Jack Cichy. There was Keyshawn Bierria was still on the board. Tigre Scales was still on the board. I had Kenny Young as kind of a borderline draftable player. I had him at 208 on my board. I gave it a B just because of the better positions available at the position. Better players at the position available. 132, Jaleel Scott, the big wide receiver out of New Mexico State, 6'6", 220, decent speed as well. I had him at 140 on my board. They got him at 132. I gave this another A. Then they double down, get another wide receiver at 162, Jordan Lasley out of UCLA, guy with some off-field concerns, probably why he fell a little bit. I had him at 118. I gave them another A. Then I love their pick at 190. Deshaun Elliott, I had him as my 70th best player in the class. So I gave him a late round 2, early round 3 grade. I gave this an A+. For them to get him in round 5, and he's probably easily going to take over for Eric Weddle, who may not have that much time left. Being productive, I think Eric Weddle probably has about 1 or 2 years left, and by then Deshaun Elliott should be really, really good, and he gets to learn from Eric Weddle and Tony Jefferson, 2 of the best safeties in the NFL. Greg Sinnett at 212, I didn't know who he was, so I gave it a C. Ozzie, going to do some Ozzie stuff. At 215, Bradley Bozeman, the center out of guess where? Alabama. I had him at 169 on my board. I loved the pick. I gave it an A. And then Zach Sealer, defensive end, out of some really fucking small school at 238. I didn't know who he was, so I gave it a C. I weighted some of the picks a little differently. I was going to give this actually a regular A, but the bad pick, in my opinion, at the top of the draft with Hayden Hurst. Lowered it to an A-. So still a really good draft. Now let's get into another draft that I really didn't like all that much. Let's get into the Pittsburgh Steelers. First of all, great moment at 28 when Ryan Shazier walks out on stage to announce the pick. I thought when Schefter announced that it was, I'll admit I was watching the draft on delay. So when Schefter when they said Schefter had announced that there was something big, coming up, that for the Steelers pick, I thought it was Shaquem Griffin, and they announced it was Terrell Edmunds, the older brother of Tremaine Edmunds, a linebacker. And I at first thought that Pittsburgh didn't know Tremaine Edmunds was off the board yet. I had Terrell Edmunds as my 100th overall player. It was a need, but when Justin Reed is still available, Ronnie Harrison is still available, and Jesse Bates are still available, what the fuck was going on here? Terrell Edmunds was I believe he was my 8th ranked safety in the draft. He was, in fact, my 9th ranked safety in the draft. My 8th ranked safety was Cameron Kelly, who went undrafted. Regardless, you draft a guy that you probably could have gotten at pick 100 at 28. This really sent shockwaves through the draft. No one really saw this pick coming. No one really understood this pick. I gave it a C-. I didn't understand it. Come back, pick 60. I like this pick, though. They went and got James Washington, the wide receiver, out of Oklahoma State. Now, they did trade Martavis Bryant during night 1 for a 3rd-round pick, which was a 76th overall pick. I'll get to in a minute. So James Washington, a bit more of your conventional slot receiver. Martavis Bryant was really the 3rd best receiver on the team with the emergence of Juju. Now they get themselves a true slot receiver to help out Ben. I like this pick. Then they go and get Ben's probable successor in Oklahoma State, quarterback Mason Rudolph, who has familiarity throwing James Washington. Really like the pick. I thought maybe he was going to potentially sneak into the end of round 1, but he was actually the 6th quarterback taken after none were taken in round 2. Like the value of the pick. James Washington was 48 on my board. Mason Rudolph was 52 on my board. I gave it an A. Really like the pick. Really like the fact that he seems to be a little bit of a scheme fit as well. So, again, kind of a shot in the dark, but, I really like the pick, so I gave it an A. Then they go and get another personal favorite player of mine, Chukwuma Okorafor, the offensive tackle out of Western Michigan. This is the reason why Taylor Moton was always a right tackle in college, because Chukwuma Okorafor held down that left side. Okorafor was always really highly ranked until, again, I rewatched some of his tape around the combine, and I just kind of saw some technique flaws, but those can be worked on, especially in Pittsburgh, where they always seem to produce really good offensive linemen. I had him at 73 on my board. This is an A- pick all day. Again, Pittsburgh, they may not have nailed that first pick, but they're starting to nail the middle parts of the draft. At 148, they came back on the clock. They got Marcus Allen, the safety out of Penn State, who honestly is a little bit of the same player as Terrell Edmunds. And I don't hate the pick as much because I had Marcus Allen 113 on my board and you got him at 148. I gave this another A-. The only reason it wasn't an A+ is because, again, he's almost the exact same player as your first pick that you horrendously reached on. I don't understand. This is more also a knock on the Terrell Edmunds pick. I just don't understand that pick. But they started to nail every pick afterwards. Jalen Samuels, the tight end, H-back, fullback, running back, whatever you want to call him, offensive weapon essentially out of NC State, was the pick at 165. He was 136 on my board. I gave it an A. Jalen Samuels was always one of my favorite players to watch because I just felt like he was such a weapon that you could use in so many different ways. And then they finish it off with Josh Frazier, a defensive lineman out of Alabama, he was a rotational guy at Alabama, so I wasn't really going to focus on him that much, so he wasn't on my board. I gave it a C just because he wasn't on my board. But the Steelers nailed that middle portion of the draft. I loved it, but that first pick was just so bad I couldn't give them an A- or a B+. I had to give them a B. That's going to do it for right now, guys. Come back in a couple of hours where we will have the grades for the NFC North. Until then, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, tell another friend. I'll see you in a couple of hours, guys.